This week's Bizline, Vietnam braces for a trade winter. And challenges and opportunities for exporting Vietnamese goods. Hello there, you're tuning into Bizline on VTV International. I'm Hoàng Hằng. Statistics have shown that 2022 was a year of recovery for Vietnam, making it likely that it remains one of Asia's outperformers. With benefits from the reopening, Vietnam's growth rate reached 8.1% in 2022 compared to previous forecasts of 7.6%. However, challenges will likely be more intense in 2023. Vietnam's growth outlook has been clouded by increasing trade headwinds. As an export-oriented manufacturing country that has penetrated deeply into the global manufacturing system, Vietnam will not be immune to a significant global trade slowdown. In other words, payback time has arrived. So what policies should be implemented to maintain the growth rate of the export sector and contribute to the overall growth of the whole economy in the face of global difficulties and challenges? That's the main topic of this week's Bizline. But first, let's take a look at our following video.
Looking back on trade activities in 2022, and having overcome global difficulties with the effective implementation of numerous solutions, Vietnam's exports maintained a high growth rate. The total export turnover in 2022 reached $732.5 billion, up 10.6% compared to the rate of 2021. New generation free trade agreements have also made a significant impact on Vietnamese trade activities, as export to new countries with free trade relations recorded a growth rate of over 20% and even 30% in some markets. The rate is much higher than the general export growth rate. The structure of export goods also continues to improve in a positive direction, such as the reduction of raw products and the increase of processed and industrial products, which has created favorable conditions for Vietnam to participate more deeply in the global supply chain. However, with various factors shaping the world economy in 2023, Vietnamese export activities will likely face significant challenges. The first source of pressure appeared in the last month of 2022 when export businesses faced a shortage of orders, due to inflationary pressure in numerous countries, including Vietnam's major trade partners. Another source of pressure can be pointed out as the financial pressure on exporting enterprises. Another difficulty is that due to the rapid increase in the export capacity of Vietnam's goods, Vietnamese exports have become the subject of trade remedy measures by trade partners. And this requires timely adaptive measures. These difficulties pose a significant challenge to achieving the export target of over 6% growth in 2023.
For more in-depth comments, we're connecting with economist Yun Liu, HSBC Global Research from HSBC Bank. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Now, according to newly released statistics, overall, Vietnam's trade activity exceeded $700 billion for the first time in history in 2022, reaching $732 billion, bringing Vietnam into the group of the leading economies in international trade. As a result, Vietnam's reported a trade surplus for the 7th consecutive year with $11 billion, nearly 3 times higher than in 2021. So what is your opinion of this result?
So yes, we've seen Vietnam's trade outperformance in 2022 compared to a lot of regional peers. I mean, especially in the first half of the year, we saw quite resilient shipments from electronic products, from textile, and it was pretty much from everything, from across the board, from all the major categories. Vietnam is one of the notable examples in Asia or in the world that have seen, it climb up the value chain quite quickly, right? And really thanks to consistent FDI inflows. So yes, I expect that FDI inflows to continue in Vietnam, and it will help Vietnam in the future. But what we have seen is that starting in the second half of 2022, the trade headwinds really have started to kick in. And Vietnam, because it's deeply embedded in the global supply chain, it's also one of the countries to suffer from, trade headwinds. And that trade headwinds, I mean, if we look at the most recent trade data, if we look at the most recent last quarter, the fourth quarter of GDP data, that trade headwinds really has taken a toll on Vietnam's economy. So I think that's also, it's good that Vietnam did well in 2022 overall, but I think we also need to be mindful of the risk coming into 2023.
It can be seen that inflationary pressure has increased. The growth outlook has also been clouded by increasing trade headwinds. Is it correct to say that the biggest risk to Vietnam's growth in 2023 is increasing trade difficulties?
Yes, so I believe there are two big downside risks to Vietnam's growth in 2023. First one, as you rightfully mentioned, is the trade headwinds, and we're already seeing that in the data, right? The most frequent trade data. Well, I mean, there were some basic facts here and there, but really, I think the falling orders from the U.S., from Europe, Vietnam's major trading partners here is really a concern. And then the other thing is persistent inflation pressure. I mean, partially, well, this is not only a phenomenon that we saw in Vietnam, but also in other ASEAN countries as well, which is the domestic reopening tailwinds really have been the main driver for economic rebound since the second quarter of 2022. And we expect that pent-up demand, to continue into 2023. But here, one of the risks is that, with this high inflation, then how much of that will squeeze into, residents' wallets. So I think that's also something that we got to watch for.
High inflation and tight monetary policies in a number of countries have severely affected the global economic outlook. The World Bank has projected a significant drop in its forecast for global growth, from 4.1% to 2.8%. Meanwhile, more than 90% of developed economies and 80% of developing economies have lowered their growth forecasts for 2023. Inflation has caused a sharp drop in purchasing power in major economies, thereby making Vietnam's exports less favorable in the fourth quarter of 2022. This enterprise, for example, which specializes in exporting handicrafts to the US, has been directly affected by inflation from this market. Its 30 direct employees and nearly 2,000 indirect employees have experienced a 25% decrease in orders from its partners, while the costs of materials have also increased by 30%.
Khó khăn này nó còn kéo dài ít nhất là nửa năm của 2023 nữa. Thì bây giờ để mình doanh nghiệp thích ứng được với cái khó khăn này là phải tìm ra nhiều nguồn ra hơn, mở rộng cái mạng lưới phân phối hàng ra.
Not only have orders declined and input costs increased, but there also have been more difficulties for exporters. The interest rate level has inched up by at least 1 to 2% per year compared to before, while exchange rates have gotten higher.
I know the State Bank of Vietnam has raised policy interest rates twice. They've widened the band of fluctuation of the exchange rate from 3% to 5% to take pressure off of the foreign reserves. And this year, so far, the Vietnam dong has depreciated against the US dollar.
Maintaining the growth momentum for Vietnam's exports will not be easy in the time ahead, especially as global inflation pressure persists, along with the fact that Vietnam's main trade partners continue to have to tighten their monetary policies.
The country's export drive, which has been very strong in the past and has shown to be resilient, including during the COVID-19 crisis, when manufacturing exports were the main driver of GDP growth. Even though we expect the growth of exports to slow down as global demand is weakening, they will continue to contribute to growth.
As difficulties remain, export enterprises' existence and ability to thrive will depend highly on their own adaptation and resilience to challenges and fluctuations.
Vietnam's export enterprises are currently facing many difficulties. So what is their biggest challenge?
Export, I think definitely is the falling orders. And I mean, we are facing a cooling global trade cycle. And, as much as Vietnam was benefiting from that booming trade cycle, now, unfortunately, it's the time to sort of do a payback. I mean, especially on the electronic shipments, the world saw like a booming probably 2 years of electronic shipments, and Vietnam largely benefited from it. But now with inflation kicking in, we saw that falling electronics shipments really being the main drag of Vietnam's exports. But I mean, it's also going beyond just electronics. Vietnam is also very sensitive to an economic growth slowdown in major trading partners like the US and Europe. So yes, that's something we gotta watch for in 2023.
Vietnam traditional export products, textile and footwear have also begun to decline in terms of orders in the context of high inflation and a shift in consumption from goods to services in Western countries. Many experts predict that Vietnam will see a decline in this sector. What do you think about this? And will 2023 be a challenging year for these key export products?
Yes, definitely. It will be a challenging year. And we're already seeing that in the data. It's not, it goes beyond just electronic goods, textile, footwear, which is very much sensitive to the consumer spending power in the West. And we're already seeing that declines as well. And then in particular, actually, one point I want to make is, since the US-China trade tensions, Vietnam has gained substantial market share in the US economy. And in the past 2.5 years, Vietnam's exports really benefited from a booming US economic rebound. But now with the slowdown in the US economy, Vietnam is probably more sensitive compared to the regional peers to a growth slowdown. So, for example, wooden products, a lot of it is very much closely related to the US property cycle. And we saw that going down as well. So, yes.
Order shortages are happening in many factories, especially in the textile and footwear industry. In some enterprises, about 30% or even 50% of their employees have had to take a break, resulting in their income being affected. As such, both enterprises and workers are trying to overcome hardships together, since this difficult situation is forecast to last until the end of the first quarter of 2023. For this enterprise, since the second half of 2022, the number of its major orders to the EU market has unexpectedly declined. To ensure operations and retain the jobs of more than 1,500 workers, the company has sought orders from niche markets such as South Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia, and at the same time, is transforming and diversifying its products according to market demand.
Chúng tôi hiện nay là mặt hàng truyền thống là sản xuất giày da nữ thời trang, nhưng chúng tôi cũng đang tìm mọi cách là chuyển đổi sang một phần sản xuất sang sản xuất giày thể thao, để làm sao mà có nhiều đơn hàng, đa dạng hóa mặt hàng và có cái hàng để cho người lao động làm việc.
Meanwhile, compared to the first half of 2022, this enterprise's orders have decreased to only 70 to 80% since the third quarter of the year. The company has strived to maintain production activities by taking temporary measures such as reducing working hours and giving breaks to employees. Moreover, more than 53,000 of its employees have helped the company by accepting a 20 to 30% reduction in income.
Thứ nhất là đơn hàng nhỏ, thứ hai đơn hàng lời rất ít vẫn phải nhận. Mà trước đây thì công ty còn thí như là quý 1, quý 2 á, công ty còn chọn những cái mặt hàng là có lợi nhuận cao hơn vì đơn hàng rất nhiều. Nhưng sau đó quý 3, quý 4 là công ty cũng vì cái ổn định để công nhân ổn định việc làm, cho nên là những cái đơn hàng là hơi bị ít lợi nhuận cũng nhận được.
Due to difficulties in traditional markets such as the US, the EU, and Japan, Vietnamese enterprises are expanding their networks to find orders in new markets. Meanwhile, large enterprises with abundant orders are sharing orders with smaller enterprises. Others have also been looking for short-term opportunities in the domestic market. Apart from trying to maintain workers' jobs, Many enterprises have also prepared THÄT incentives for their employees to try and ensure they receive the same THÄT bonuses as the previous year.
Experts say that due to the rapid increase in the export capacity of Vietnam's goods, Vietnamese exports have become the subject of trade remedy measures by trade partners. Will this be a challenge for Vietnam's export in 2023?
Well, I mean, I would actually argue otherwise. There are challenges, but there are also opportunities, right? Well, a few years ago, we saw U.S.-China trade tensions, but we have seen Vietnam is one of biggest beneficiaries from those, not only from an export diversion perspective, but also from FDI diversion perspective. So with the right policies, implemented, then I believe that Vietnam, while there are, some near-term challenges on the trade front, no doubt, but in the near term, in the medium to long term, I believe there's still plenty of opportunities for Vietnam.
So is it safe to say that the growth outlook has been clouded by increasing trade headwinds? What does Vietnam need to do to remove difficulties and overcome the upcoming payback time?
Yes, I mean, so this is not a Vietnam only problem here, right? We are seeing that in other ASEAN markets as well, because 2022 was such a good year for ASEAN overall. Vietnam in particular, its growth jumped by 8%, very impressive pace. But then in 2023 here, so one is, the trade headwinds we talk about. And then the other one is the domestic, reopening. In fact, it will ultimately fade away. So I think probably for the first half of the year, it will probably hold up. But then the question is, when the inflation pressure really intensifying, how is it going to impact private consumption? I think the ESG part is, has been a trendy and dominant theme in the world. So, there's no reason why Vietnam shouldn't follow that trend. And in terms of the FDI part, yes, I would think that there are still a lot of opportunities embedded in the FDI and FTA, and actually Vietnam compared to emerging markets in ASEAN is in a better position because it has a FTA with the UK, with Europe. And this, a position that only Singapore, developed market like Singapore enjoys. So I think Vietnam in that part, really, it should, take more advantage of that FTA part.
So far, Vietnam has participated in negotiations and signed 17 free trade agreements, of which 15 have been implemented. Thanks to this, the country's export turnover to many markets has gained double-digit annual growth. According to experts, joining FTAs will help enterprises expand their export markets and reduce costs thanks to preferential tariffs.
Well, there are many FTAs to choose from, so they must first decide which free trade agreement that they need to access. And then they have to know what is in the free trade agreement. So what are the market access benefits, which tariffs have been removed, both on imports.
Meanwhile, many industries in Vietnam are promoting green production to maintain and expand export markets. The textile and garment industry, one of Vietnam's key exports, is not an exception to that trend. The country has gained initial success in this transformation as many domestic enterprises have obtained green production certifications from highly demanding markets.
Hành trình đó rất gian nan, tỉ mỉ và giám sát cẩn thận ở tất cả các khâu. Nên kết quả đạt được hôm nay, chúng tôi rất tự hào. Từ đó chúng tôi nâng cao giá trị sản phẩm, mở rộng thị trường xuất khẩu, được khách hàng và đối tác tin tưởng lựa chọn, khẳng định được chỗ đứng sản phẩm của công ty trên thị trường dệt may theo xu hướng xanh, sạch.
Import and export were a highlight in the country's economic scene last year as Vietnam continued to set new records with a total turnover of about $732 billion, maintaining a trade surplus for the 7th consecutive year, while dozens of export commodities earned billions of USD in revenue. To maintain growth this year in the context of the world economy facing many difficulties, many solutions have been proposed by the Ministry of Industry and Trade. Among them, it was suggested that enterprises proactively improve the competitiveness of their products, as well as ensure they meet criteria on product origin.
Yêu cầu về bảo vệ môi trường là một cái yêu cầu mà rất là cấp thiết, và cái điều đó nó cũng phản ánh vào trong các cái vấn đề về sản xuất và thương mại hàng hóa. Ví dụ những cái tiêu chuẩn về xanh hóa của các cái sản phẩm, đặc biệt là ngay trong cả những cái sản phẩm về mặt tiêu dùng thì chúng ta cũng thấy cái yêu cầu xanh hóa rất là cao, và cái điều đó nó sẽ tác động đến toàn bộ cái chuỗi cung ứng.
According to the Minister of Industry and Trade, in the time ahead, the ministry will strengthen the exploitation of potential neighboring markets and boost the shift to official exports in association with branding to promote sustainable export activities. In addition, the country will innovate trade promotion methods and develop digital infrastructure to promote the distribution of goods through e-commerce channels.
How about the development prospects of Vietnam's export in 2023 despite global headwinds?
Well, I think Vietnam is very much deeply embedded into the global supply chain, so it will not be insulated from the cooling trade cycle. So in the short term, in the near term, there are a lot of trade challenges, and it's not only a Vietnam phenomenon. We see that in all sorts of markets around the world. But I think one of the sort of green shoots that we can talk about is the FDI, which we've been talking about quite consistently. With consistent FDI inflows to Vietnam, so it can help brighten Vietnam's trade prospects in the medium and long term.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Economists say that 2023 will have many opportunities and challenges. It will be a challenge to maintain and increase the growth rate of export activities. In this context, the simultaneous implementation of a number of solutions to remove difficulties, support businesses, as well as remain flexible in production to seize opportunities for recovery and effectively harness the benefits of free trade agreements are among the key factors that will help export activities overcome a trade winter. These measures will also contribute to the target of achieving export growth of 6% in 2023, thereby contributing to the overall growth of the whole economy. And on that note, we wrap up this edition of Bizline. Stay with us for more content, or if you're on the go, feel free to download our app VTV Go from App Store and Google Play, or subscribe to our YouTube channel VTV4 Go. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.